and welcome to my video presentation on my podcast series for the new media writing class. And the reason I am doing a video presentation is totally not because I missed my presentation day. It's actually, and you gotta believe this, it's actually because my podcast series has to do with shoutcasting, which is a phenomenon in esports or video game competition where players talk about what's going on in a video game, and they're essentially players talking to like nothing, like basically just a screen and broadcasting it to people. So I figured, this would be appropriate, right? I mean, you're obviously not buying this, but that's cool. So I'll just continue with my presentation. So what is the podcast? Basically, the podcast is an explainer series where I actually explain things. Pretty simple as that. Lots of words to go through. I basically go through why shoutcasting came about, why shoutcasting is a thing, what makes a good shoutcaster, and eventually throughout the series I get to Twitch casting, which is entirely different. Anyways, without further ado, that's actually a lot I use frequently in the series. I'm going to play an episode of the series, so I can, and do that.
My name is Brian Pence, and today we're going to be starting a series on shoutcasting in video games. We'll start off with a quick introduction to esports, and we'll talk about how shoutcasting came about. And from there, we'll briefly explore the basics of shoutcasting and how the video game industry has adapted to the increasing demands of quality esports events. So anyways, without further ado, let's do the thing. So, the modern gamer has to inevitably contend with the fact that they are, in fact, people pressing buttons and staring at screens. Now, if the cumulative existential dread of such an activity seems to be taxing on the gamer's soul, he might then reflect on the fact that the video game caster, or shoutcaster as they call it in longhand, has to contend with these pains doubly so. Indeed, staring and talking at screens containing people pressing buttons and staring at screens would seem from an outward, alien perspective to be the most absurd endeavor one could think of. However, like most absurd endeavors, this particular absurd endeavor occurs for a reason, and like most reasons, this reason is money. Yes, money. Somewhere between the time Pong was released and the time that Activision bought out Major League Gaming for a few $100 million a few months ago, corporations that produce video games have discovered that there is, in fact, a lot of money to be made from projecting screens in which people are pressing buttons and staring at screens. But, in all reality, the fast-paced action of a video game in a fantasy world, curated by the players in competition with one another, does, in fact, create a number of entertaining scenarios that the real world of actual sports and all their protective gear, multi-billion-dollar stadiums, etc., cannot produce. Likewise, EA, Activision, Blizzard, Bungie, and Valve are on the serendipitous end of a developing multi-million-dollar industry that has become increasingly parallel and therefore comparable to real sports. And like real sports, there's a demand for people to talk about these esports, as they're called, in real time.
Yeah, switching track.
Cue video game shoutcasters. They are the hype people of these events.
They are.
They narrate the action, they give the audience brief insights into the minds of the players. They decide which happenings in video games fall under the various categories of dope, unbelievable, or embarrassing. So pretty much everything a sportscaster knows. And like in the real world of sportscasting, the world of esports casting includes good casters and bad casters. But what makes a good esports caster and what makes a bad caster? That's a good question, and one that is becoming increasingly impertinent to the aforementioned multi-million-dollar AAA game developers with shareholders breathing down their necks. So we're going to spend the latter half of this podcast discussing this exact topic. As Activision found out when putting an ex-Halo caster into the emerging game of Destiny, it is the most important rule that a caster, first and foremost, has to know how the game is played. They need to know what the titles of every attack is, and they need to know the shorthand names that competitive gamers give to each individual series of inputs. For instance, in Super Smash Bros. Melee, a game with a 10-year esports history, the casters refer to each attack by portmanteaus of the actions and buttons the players perform to perform an in-game attack.
What actually happened.
Time and time again. Man, he's been in the lab. Good dash dance grab. Oh my gosh. Slow down, Smuckers.
That was surprising hard clip to find.
By the way, lots of resets with weak hits here with down air, and I think he did a reset with first hit up air. Yeah.
Furthermore, They must also know a little bit about each game's meta, or what kinds of strategies tend to win, and how rational competitive players counter these strategies. This is where regular sportscasters and esportscasters differ. In video games, there are only a set amount of inputs that can be made. Every action in game has a set deterministic effect, and therefore the caster can make broader attempts at predicting what kinds of actions each player will have to take to create a desired result. At the extreme end, a fighting game caster might know frame data, or the exact amount of time known as split seconds that it takes for each attack to connect, and how quickly a follow-up, or counter move, can be placed in those split seconds. Anyways, without going into too much detail in this particular episode, the job of the caster is to juggle the multiple demands of keeping the audience informed of the state of the game, making predictions, and getting into the heads of the players, while also informing people who are new to watching the esport and the basic game mechanics, and making nods to the more experienced half of the audience. The demands take more or less priority over one another depending on which genre of video game is being casted. In the next episode, we'll take a deeper look at each genre and we'll look at specific examples of how these genres are casted. Anywho, that's all the time we have for today. And remember, if the existential dread of being a person pressing buttons and screens gets to you, know that I'm a person talking about people staring at screens and talking about people staring at screens and pressing buttons. Anyways, I'm Brian Pence, and this has been a podcast on video game shoutcasting. Peace.
So that's that. So I had a number of difficulties producing this series. The first was something that we had talked about early in the semester, and that was writing for sound. Apparently I'm really, really bad at writing for sound. And part of it had to do with the sort of explanatory nature of the podcast I was doing, because I had a lot of information to get through really, really fast in a small amount of time. So I kind of just made a script that was written for writing, but I had to compensate for the fact that I wasn't writing for sound with a lot of sort of changes. I added sort of like an ambient, like progressive, just ambient hip hoppy sounding kind of a track to it to give it sort of like a rhythm kind of. The focus wasn't so much as getting like every single word in, or like understanding every single word and like reflecting on every single word, but sort of just getting the general gist of what I was saying, kind of like an ironic sort of crash course kind of feel, I guess, on stuff. So I'd have basically these really, really long runs where I would just be talking without breath, and I wanted to get those done in like one take, so I actually did that. The most takes I had to do for one was that middle one where I was talking about EA Activision building Bungie. That one took like 20 takes. That was awful, but that was fun. Really, really fun. Anyways, some of the other challenges of making voice. We talked a lot about voice this semester. I had a lot of vocal fry, and that made getting out lines really fast really, really hard. So I had to sort of overcome that by slowing down in some places. I struggle with certain words, getting certain words out of my mouth, and every time I made a mistake, I'd have to make like another take. So yeah, vocal fry, and I fixed that partly by stressing consonants, and getting comfortable with my own voice, because I really don't like hearing my own voice at all. So yeah, we talked about that at like the very, very beginning of the semester on the first day, and I didn't think that would be a thing. But after hearing my voice for these podcasts and sort of these recordings we made, like I just don't like hearing my own voice. It's really, really sad. Anyways, so yeah, intelligibility, voice, that shazz. Anyways, how does this have to do with sound studies in general? Well, let me tell you, a non-existent audience. Well, I think the audience will exist in the future after my post-production stuff. Anyways, sound studies. So video game shopcasters, they're essentially they're the what's the word? They're the narrators. They're the narrators of sort of live action games, a lot like sportscasters. I make the comparison a lot in the podcast between sportscasters and esportscasters. They just sit at the edge of an esports competition and they talk into a microphone with nobody in front of them, kind of like what I'm doing right now. And they just they sort of just add sort of hype to the action. And another thing is video games. Video games are sort of these environments. They're very metaphysical, I would say. I wouldn't say that they are very metaphysical. They're physical at all. So like you're being presented this sort of like world that's entirely like light on a video screen, and video games themselves have very curated sound. You have every single action in a video game being curated by the people who make the game. Every sound effect, everything is just pre-recorded, and it will play at a very specific time. And in fact, what's really, really interesting is that there are actually blind video game players in fighting games, and they're actually cool. They're actually cool things, tricks and techniques they use to know where their physical in-game avatars are at on screen, so they can actually be in those competitions. Anyways, it's really, really, really cool. Mostly fighting games. First-person shooters are a little bit hard, or apparently really, really hard, so they have to have blind players playing first-person shooters. But yeah, basically, video games are heavily sound-intensive environments, and part of the shoutcaster's job is to make sure their voice is going with that sound, because they have to sort of compete with the in-game sound. So that's a thing. Anyways, moving on to Twitch casting. I realized that there actually wasn't that much material I could do on shoutcasting because it's a rather new phenomenon, but I did go through like how shoutcasting works with each genre, and I sort of went into like the sort of sound techniques that, or like voice and sound techniques that that shoutcasters can control with each genre. For instance, fighting games have a faster tempo where shoutcasters are like struggling to get every word they can in because the action's just happening so fast, and how first-person shooter games are more the shoutcaster trying to create a bird's eye view of the game, because it's in first person and you don't get to see that first person view, and there's a lot of downtime and stuff like that. So that's what I described in that series, sort of difference between the genres. Anyways, that was sort of like all the material I could get from Twitch from shoutcasting. So I moved on to Twitch casting in the third episode. Twitch casting is actually very, very unique because basically it's everything. It ended up being everything that shoutcasting included as far as sound is concerned, but it sort of added another level to that. You have another level economically. You have streamers who are sort of like self-promoters. Their personalities, sort of like they broadcast from sort of their private spaces in their little gaming cocoons to like a public space, which is the internet. It combines sort of IRC chats, an IRC style discussion like chat that they have to interact with. On top of the fact that they're also like the shoutcaster. They have to commentate on their own gameplay. They have to be good. They have to play the game with a degree of personal skill, as I mentioned in my third episode. And ultimately, they have to interact with the people in the chat appropriately. And I kind of did a quick meditation, I guess, on how cool it is that Twitch casters exist. It's kind of like something that hasn't existed before, because if you go into like if you go into like real sports, you can't just sit down with your favorite NBA player or football player or soccer player and like have a conversation with them. Part of the selling point and the reason why Twitch casting is such a large industry is because of that personal aspect to it. So again, it's really is a mix of video and sound from multiple sources, including in-game. And sometimes Twitch casters will even have like music. I don't even know how they do it, but they have music playing in the background while they're playing a game, talking about the game, and then they have to talk to the people that they're with in the game. So like people on their team and stuff, and they kind of have to balance that around and make priorities and stuff. I've played with famous with sort of like popular Twitch casters in video games. Sometimes it can be annoying because like you won't know if they're talking to the people in the chat, or if they're talking to the people, or if they're talking to you in game, which is really, really funny because the people in the chat do know because they have like a video of them. Again, it's like it's multiple levels and layers, and that's why it made it so interesting to look at from a soundstage perspective. Anyways, one thing that did stand out to me in Twitch casting was the sort of politics of sound that came about it. It's actually very different from radio. Video games sort of produce kind of it starts Twitch casting sort of started out with like a few people like getting really famous really fast, but as sort of the video games have sort of expanded, there's been more of a demand for diversity in Twitch casting that hadn't really existed in the video game industry before, due to a number of reasons. Companies haven't been marketing their games towards people of different races and different genders. It's been mostly dominated by white males, which was a serious problem. But Twitch has sort of the market of Twitch has sort of skewed that to be more reflective of the people who actually would be interested in video games, which is pretty much everybody because they're pretty cool. So you'll have streams with people of different races, genders, and even languages, countries, because there's a demand for it. And frankly, as far as good gameplay, like video games produce this great environment where you can't really argue with good gameplay. There's no, of course there are incidences that occur, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It's sort of like an equalizing force. Like if you're good at the game, you can talk about the game, and you can be a cool person, and you can be a personality on Twitch, and people will like follow you because, I mean, gameplay is gameplay. So it's kind of like a neat sort of neat little social experiment that's ongoing on Twitch. Likewise, with that sort of expansion of diversity in gaming, the response to that from the video game industry has been very positive. That there's now more interest from actual companies. Companies are saying, "Hey, look at all these people who are now interested in video games and stuff. Hey, now we can start making our video games more appealing to a more diverse audience." So now you see games like, whereas in CS:GO you had, or not CS:GO, you had games, first-person shooters, which were entirely the cast or like the people in the game would be all white males, the heroes would be white males. But then you have Overwatch coming around. From Blizzard, and games like Overwatch, where you have an ensemble of in-game playable characters from different ethnicities, different religions, different backgrounds, just a lot of basically everything. And the response has been from players. I mean, Overwatch is Game of the Year, or is looking at like Game of the Year titles, and has sold like a ton, and it's a hugely popular esport that's sort of blown up, and looking at being like part of a multi-million-dollar industry of esports, which is something that has taken other similar games in their more limited market years and years and years and years to sort of attain that sort of economic viability. So yeah, Twitch. Although there is a little bit of toxicity on Twitch that for some reason sticks around. Well, not for some reason, mainly because there are sort of lurkers in the gaming community who are kind of awful. And there was actually an incident in Destiny, in the video game Destiny, where a streamer, a popular streamer with thousands and thousands and thousands of viewers, went into a game that included the developers of the game of Destiny, and they were having a stream with a group called Dames of Destiny. It's a sort of a female-only group of Destiny players, and it was just a sort of I guess an in-game space for women to play video games. Anyways, somehow this popular streamer who apparently had a massive audience and following, jumped into the stream and said a bunch of lewd comments and was kicked off. Anyway, so that's kind of like there is that sort of toxicity there in Twitch. But what's really cool is that Twitch is he got banned, and it's really funny too, because he was raking in like a lot of money from like donations and stuff, but he got banned from Twitch and YouTube and the game itself. So there was a little bit of so again, sort of the market of Twitch has sort of expanded gaming to a point where that toxicity still exists, but it's sort of being openly rebuked because it's like, hey, this isn't just a space for one group of people anymore, kind of a thing. And that kind of gets into sort of politics of, we're talking about politics of radio, etc. Twitch is very much or very much not similar to how radio became very homogenous. Twitch casting has managed to become quite diverse. It's still got a ways to go though. Anyways, another thing I'd like to reflect on in Twitch casting is that it is in fact sound from around the world. In very just different spaces, you can have one person on one side of the world play with one person on another side of the world in a game, and they're broadcasting to people who can be anywhere, and you're taking sort of the private space, this sort of private oral environment, and broadcasting into a public environment, which is relevant. And you have sort of a conversational environment going on the side. Again, it's very layered and sort of multidimensional. Anyways, back to my podcast series. Moving my notes real quick. Distribution. Actually, I actually have a cool thing. If I can pull it up real quick. I actually am a Reddit community person. Excuse the title of the thing. And I've amassed enough things. And I have like this archive of sort of posts that I leave. Anyways, all these posts sort of have gotten popular. What do we got here? Like this guy did quitting Destiny, which I didn't quit Destiny because it's a really good game. Anyways, I have a lot of attention with that. So and I do that through the Destiny the Game subreddits, the sort of the Overwatch subreddits, and the art gaming subreddits. So these kind of podcasts, I sort of already have a sort of place where I can put that. I also have a YouTube channel I can put that on. If I can pull that up, it's not as popular. Under the name Quadigy, don't ask about that. Yeah, that's a video game clip of me. Anyways, this is my YouTube channel, and I can put it on here, and that reach a number of people. And then I have a Twitter too, but I won't pull that up. Anyway, so those are just means by which I can sort of place my podcast or get attention for it. Other than that, I can put it on an RSS, just so I can link it to it from those various sources, and hopefully it would spread around. Anyways, end this in the similar manner the way I ended the podcast episodes. I'm Brian Pence, and this has been a series on video game shoutcasting in the form of a video presentation to know people. Peace. Okay, comments, questions, concerns. Yes, you. Twitch. I should have explained that in the presentation. Okay, so Twitch is actually a platform where you can stream videos. So I'm sorry I didn't give you guys that information. I should have done that in the presentation. But yeah, Twitch is it's like YouTube but for live videos. Anything else? Dr. Rivers. Yeah, that was a challenge in the presentation, or in making this presentation, was dealing with sort of the net entropy of the universe collapsing around me, and yeah, it was quite a problem. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely had to think about that a lot. Any other questions? No, we're good. All right, sweet.